our trashy novel of what's Theodosia Burr.
I haven't.
I think it's a great idea
for a long time.
I haven't dropped it. Just so you know, I still think it's a great idea.
Obviously, yeah.
Yeah. So how are you?
I am okay. I think the both of us spent a lot of the day staring at computer screens, and for me, teaching starts this week. So the summer is officially over, and that is always I don't even know what to call it. It's not sad. It's kind of fraught time of year.
Yeah, I refuse to let summer slip away. At the same time, the beginning of the school year is a time of such extraordinary excitement. And I am not going back to teaching in the fall at Boston College just because I'm so busy doing other stuff and I'm trying to write this new book. And I miss it. You know, just so you know, the other side of this, where I have so many of my friends going back to work and they're like, no, I don't want to go back and be stuck in a classroom. And I totally used to be that way. And this year I'm like, have fun.
I'm always that way in August. And then I get back to campus, and just like you're saying, it's the charge of teaching and the students, and everyone's excited, and you're starting out, and yeah, give me a day or two. Life will be good. But right now I'm just running around.
Okay, so I suspect people are thrilled to hear you're going back to teaching, but that's not why they're here. What's on your mind?
Okay, so the thing that occurred to me, which probably says more about my sleeping habits. Last night, in the middle of the night,
just so you know, to be non-existent, just saying.
Well, there's that. Totally. I'm a member. I founded the 3 a.m. club on social media. So at some point around 3 a.m. last night, I saw a bunch of stories about the ongoing chalk battle about the Rainbow Crosswalk in Orlando, Florida, and how it started out being a rainbow as a memorial to the people killed in the Pulse shooting, and then local authorities came and painted it out or erased it, and then the original people came back and put a different form of it up, and I believe that's on its way out. I saw a picture that said, after it had been erased, I saw a picture that said, we have a lot of chalk. So they're coming back.
Yeah, they're coloring in the chalk sections, the sections with the different colors of chalk as a community effort. Yeah,
exactly. Well, and so that's the thing that occurred to me at 3 o'clock in the morning. What it made me think about is a kind of equivalent act during the American Revolution, the Liberty Pole. And the Liberty Pole really was nothing other than a big, tall pole that was put up in a town square. But it was put up there as a kind of symbol of resistance. You know, it represented in some way or other liberty. And
wait, stop. Does it have a flag on it?
Not necessarily.
It's just a pole. Is it like an old maypole, which was also a symbol of resistance against the Puritans?
I couldn't tell you the maypole connection, but I can tell you it doesn't necessarily.
So they just put up a pole.
A pole. Sometimes they would put like a.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's true. Humor me.
In the 19th century, we have so many more reasonable things. Okay, so they put up a pole.
Yes, in a public space, and it was meant to be there to represent like resistance to, you know, the authorities, standing in the face of the royal pushback, and it was a big enough deal that we know about them still. And whenever
all of us, but okay.
Well, okay, come on, humor me. It's me. They're big enough that Joanne Freeman knows about them. So the royal authorities would come by, and they knew what it was, and they knew what it represented, and they would knock it down. And then at some point, people would come by and put another one up. And then at some point, royal authorities would come and knock it down again. In New York, this went on for years. And I think, you know, that's what I was thinking of last night, was the chalk on and then the chalk off and then the chalk on, because that feels frivolous, but the chalk is a statement of protest and resistance. And now at this point, both sides have a stake. I didn't mean to make a poll reference. Both sides have a stake in what happens there. They both feel the need to control the outcome. So I guess part of what I was thinking is that people aren't necessarily thinking about what that crosswalk chalking means, but that's a really loud sign of protest. And you can tell that because of the way the authorities are responding.
That's actually really, really interesting and really cool. And, and one of the things I noticed about it was that obviously it's a community effort. And, one of the things that has jumped out to me this summer is how many people, especially on social media, but also in some of the traditional newspapers, are suggesting that there is not currently protest, or at least as much protest as they expected against the Trump administration. And that's a great example of local protest that actually really matters. That I could do that. I can color in a square with chalk. That's about my level of artistic ability. But it's one that actually really matters. And I suspect there's a lot of that. I mean, the memes on social media, but the posters on the walls and the shirts and a couple of people have given me shirts that have different flowers like daisies. No, wait a minute. Forget-me-nots, daisies, and tulips. And that's what's on the shirts. Well, FDT. And, things like that are much more ubiquitous, I think, than perhaps those who are expecting to see people raising their fists in the street are recognizing.
I think that's absolutely true. And I think that's important for a couple of reasons. First of all, I think you're right. And I think, of course, we don't know what's happening on a local level all over the United States. And of course, I would think, I can't see it, but that there's a lot of local protests. There's all kinds of protests happening on a local level. That you're right, on a local level matters. What's interesting and difficult in our time is, given our media and our technology, if we don't see it, we don't think it's there. And that doesn't mean it's not important locally. It is. But, there's constantly people yelling, people, we need to protest more. We need to protest more. And the question is, to get national attention for a protest is one thing and is important. But local protest, that's where you're going to touch real individuals in real ways.
So listen, I was going to push that to talk about the ways in which people like Gavin Newsom are protesting by making fun of Trump and trolling him. And now today, J.B. Pritzker, the governor of Illinois, has just given this barn burner of a speech. But, there's actually something that has been very much on my mind that I suspect you and I are two of the people who do this, who care about. One of the things that has me very concerned, and you just mentioned it when you said that the protests are sort of out of sight for the media. Mm-hmm. The people who are being arrested in these ICE sweeps and detained are invisible largely in the mainstream media. That is, you see, I hate the term alligator Alcatraz, because it makes it sound like a cartoon. Right. And the erasure of those people, right, because they're not in the media, feels to me like enslavement before the Civil War. Whereas if you didn't live in the American South, if you were in the much more populous North, you could say, oh yeah, I know that exists. And I know that my clothing is made by cotton picked by enslaved people. But I don't think it was in your face the way it needs to be for people to understand just what that means.
Right. No, that's really an interesting point. And I think that's really true. Is that in a different kind of a way, all of these people being grabbed off the street and brought who knows where. I suppose some of them were brought to Florida. Who knows where some of them are being brought. And that's an interesting thing, because on the one hand, doing that is a statement of authority, right? They're doing that to look tyrannical. They're doing that to look strong. They're doing that to scare people. But on the other hand, that's part of the power, is that we don't know the details, who it's from, what happens to them. That's scary. And there's a lot of bad things happening. But some of what we're seeing now, in the same way that putting up a Liberty pole was an act of protest, some of what we're seeing now is, and I don't want to say it's performance, meaning it doesn't matter, because it matters to everyone who's affected by this, but it's there to perform repression. It's there to perform tyranny. So yes, that's happening, but it's also a public demonstration in a public space. That's why, there are supposedly people. I read today in front of the Library of Congress, there's National Guard standing in front of the Library of Congress, or standing near the Washington Memorial. Right. So
That's informative, right?
Right. So people will see them and will draw conclusions. So that, in a way, that's a form of protest against us, against the American people.
But it's also when you say they'll see him and draw conclusions, I mean, I think maybe this is one of the reasons that the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia is so incredibly offensive to the government that they're now trying to deport him to Uganda, because he also tells a story, and that's a story they don't want people to be paying attention to. And that, I've been actually thinking a lot about this because it's hard to get that information because there is such a shutdown. People can't get into the detention camps, they're getting pushed away from the entrances and so on. And as people trying to keep a record, it's hard to know how to get that information. I will say, I heard somebody say the other day that one of the ways that the American people can push back in this era is to be the eyes and ears of the Congress people who can't get in there, to film stuff that's happening on the streets, to make sure it gets on social media, to send it to your Congress critter if that's helpful, but to make sure that people see both the resistance and the things that need to be resisted. Because there's this weird imbalance between what the White House is performing and people are reacting to, and the resistance to it, and the extraordinary harm that those decisions are making that we're not seeing.
Right. Well, that's, I know this is slightly veering us off topic, but I think about this.
Do we have a topic? I wasn't aware.
Maybe not. Oh, come on. I brought us back to the Liberty Poll for a second, right? Now I lost my train of thought. Look what you did to me. What were you just talking about?
I was talking about making sure that there's this weird disconnect between what the White House is performing that people are reacting to, and the fact that we are not seeing the resistance and the things like the deportations and the detention camps, which when people know about them, they are horrified by them. Right. And I was thinking about that. If you think about things like the civil rights movement in the 1960s, what really changes popular opinion among those people who have power to change the laws is when they actually see what's happening, when they see Emmett Till get killed and his horribly mutified body
being put on people. Right. It's totally true. And actually where I was headed before with great excitement was that I say this all the time, and I tell people this all the time, that in any way you can, you should be documenting what you see. Partly for these reasons, it's important to have a record of what's happening, particularly given, you see this video of someone being grabbed and beaten, and then the guard or ICE stand in front of them so you can't see what's happening. That's charming. So you're right. I think we need to sort of record everything and spread it around, because seeing it will absolutely make a difference.
Interesting. And I do think, like I say, that summer is often a time of waiting in American politics. And, the other piece of this that I told you that I wanted to talk about, and we decided not to, but I still think is so important, is, President Donald Trump is not mentally okay. And I've just never seen anything like this. And the reckoning is coming between the fact that, we've got the economic issues and the detentions and the deportations and the National Guard in the streets and the overreach. And now it really feels as if there is a much more concerted effort on the part of elected leaders to push back. And you're seeing it as overwhelmingly with the Democratic governors, but also with the people in the state houses. And, even we'll see with what happens when Congress gets back into session on September 2nd. They're not any longer going to be able to say, certainly the Republicans are no longer going to be able to say, oh, we'll let the courts take care of it, because, Trump's just a wackadoodle. I mean, the stuff he's doing right now is like the press conference this morning was bonkers. Right. It was just bonkers.
And here's another invisible thing. Right? This is happening there are statements like, I'm called the president of Europe, that are like wandering around in these conversations. And in the press and in some way more broadly, they're kind of invisible, partly because it's kind of what we think he always does. And that's a part of this, is being numbed to this. But in this case, it's kind of the opposite of what we were talking about, which is we can see it. And we're actually not sure how to respond, or we are sure how to respond. I take that back. But what we don't know is how the people around him are responding or are going to respond. This we were talking a moment ago about, before we came on, about King George III of England, who did suffer from madness. And the point that I made at that point was, you didn't want to blame the king for anything, right? And during the American Revolution, the patriots, they went against corrupt ministers. They went against Parliament. The absolute last person they went against was the king, because he was a person. He was the link. It would be easy to see and deeply meaningful if that was broken with. King George actually kind of cut it off first. But regardless, there's an interesting and I think long-standing way in which presidents or kings are not supposed to be sick or weak or ill. They're hidden or explained to, because they're not supposed to look the way, in this case, he does.
So this actually goes back to that whole idea of what people are seeing and what they are not seeing, because it was a big deal when the White House stopped actually listing transcripts of Trump's press conferences, because they said, oh, well, people can watch the video. But when they do post it, they post snippets of the video. And I will tell you, I watched those press conferences and they do not have a lot of viewers. You can look at YouTube, I think one of the clips I watched today had 135,000 viewers, which in a country of, hundreds of millions of people, 334 million people, that's not a lot of people watching. So, it's one of the reasons whenever I have space, I quote him and everything he says, because it is cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. I mean, today, you mentioned the president of Europe. He actually said the 7 people who came to the White House after his disastrous summit with Putin in Alaska, actually represented 38 countries, and that they called him the president of Europe. I don't know how you take any of the 3 things I just said and turn that into this dude is okay.
But the answer is what you just said, which is, if you take, although I think this is becoming increasingly difficult, so take the film back a little bit, and you could, out of context, take sentences or 2 sentences or 3 sentences and put them out there, and he would seem a lot more coherent than he actually was. I think we're now at a point where you're not going to find a lot of sentences where he's actually coherent and making sense. And the times when he's not making sense are at the level of this. It's not a matter anymore of like throwing around fake numbers. This is maybe not delusional, but I know wackadoodle is good, but I've never used that word before. Anyway, so you're right. I think a lot of what we're seeing is deliberately what we're not seeing, because people are trying to allow little pieces out so that we can, for as long as possible, remain under the delusion that he's actually of sound mind.
Well, that's a good one, of sound mind. That's a great one. I heard Marty Stewart once refer to an older musician who had lost his way as being not at home in his mind. And I like that one too. So, I think overall, what we're really talking about is resistance that is there, the performative nature of the White House trying to pretend that Trump is in control and powerful, and the fact that a lot of what we are doing, trying to navigate this crazy time, is trying to figure out what is real and what is not, by virtue of the fact that there's a real skewing of what is being covered by the news, in part because the White House is working very, very hard, first of all, to turn everything into a reality TV show. We know that White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles is literally trying to make every day a reality TV show. but also because the stuff that would really determine how people think, you can't see. I mean, again, these detentions, and you think about, as I say, enslavement or the civil rights movement, it took visibility
Right.
for people to understand what was really happening. And the Pulse
Think about
nightclub,
Black Lives Matters.
yeah,
Black
and
Lives Matters, and as soon as we could see what was happening, that took off as a movement. I think you're absolutely right. Is that we need to see it, but this is why they're erasing records and, allowing only snippets out. They're very, very carefully controlling precisely what gets out and what people can see. So with everything else, things are being erased for one reason or another. And there's a performative component to it. I guess they are allowing him the space to perform as president. He can put on president shirt.
Yeah, although I actually think, and I know we always try and keep these short for people, but I actually think if you look closely, the people around him are encouraging him to act as a real estate developer. We have the new wing of the White House. We have him, walking around the top of the White House with an architect. We have the paving of the Rose Garden, and
That's
it
what he
looks
likes
like
to do.
Mar-a-Lago. Now he's put in the sound system that is the same as Mar-a-Lago, and he can play DJ from his iPad. Now he's talking about redoing the Kennedy Center. He's talking about, beautifying Washington, D.C., which, by the way, the government actually has a group of 3 guys who design and maintain the work on all the public spaces in D.C. It feels to me like make work, because they're trying to keep him upright and involved in what he's doing while they work around him.
That is my point, right? My point is he needs to act in a space that he looks presidential. And if making him do all this, development and paving and everything else, which he likes to do, if that keeps him busy, and you can say, oh, look, he's a president who's making everything beautiful. It doesn't cut away from the main act. But I think what we're watching is a very carefully choreographed performance that isn't happening. It's a president show on every level.
I like that too, the president show. And I don't think he's calling a lot of these shots. I really don't. But I do think the people who are resisting with chalk at the Pulse nightclub crosswalk are more representative of Americans than those ones you keep hearing about, people saying, oh, no one cares. I think people care. We're just not necessarily, they're not getting the headlines that Trump's threats about the National Guard are.
And that's important for 2 reasons. Number one, because you have to know and think and be aware that all over the place, there are people doing this kind of thing that we can't see, and that makes it hard to believe in it, but that it's happening all over the place, right? That there are people out there doing that. And also, it can be a sort of encouragement to us to do our acts of performance here, and not to think we need to have 1 million people walking down Fifth Avenue to mean something, that local protest means something, and that even if people can't see it nationally, that locally these sorts of things matter. And I think the Pulse crosswalk contest just kind of peeked out enough to show what one of these acts of protest.
Plus, it was pretty. I mean, I hate to say it, but
It was. Well,
I always like the rainbow crossings, just because it's nice to see.
Well, right. Only in our time, the rainbows have been declared bad in our time, right? That's just so typical of now. Rainbows are next comes bubbles, and after that, chewing gum. But still.
It's actually interesting because rainbows have such deep connotations for Christians, and now all of a sudden, like you say, they're no good any longer.
Right.
Well, that was interesting, and very comforting. I'm like, I don't know about you. I am. We've just had the sea has gone by here from Hurricane Erin, and I had to come back in from kayaking the other day because it was one of my favorite kind of days because they were really big swells, which I like, but no chop, which it makes it hard to paddle. And I had to come back because the swells were hitting the cliffs so hard that it was creating backwash. And when that happens, the sea is really unsettled. It's not like, it's fine if there's a wind or if there's swells and they're one direction. But when there's this chop, you're just totally tossed around all the time. And the irony is that for the last 3 days, I felt like that was what the news was doing to me too. It's like you're torn between, oh my God, there's this story. Oh no, there's this story. Oh no. And you're just constantly reeling, which I know is part of the point,
Right.
but it does help. The idea of the president show and the fact that resistance is not being covered, but it's there. I think those are actually very comforting.
I agree. And I totally agree. And you're right that we live in an age of, sort of balancing balls and things happening all over the place so that you can't pay attention, and that's very deliberate. But maybe if we can own the fact that there are good things happening, that there's a majority out there that are doing things that support the idea of attacking tyranny, attacking authoritarianism, defending democracy, that there's a lot of people out there, they're doing something. We might not be able to see it, but we should know it's happening out there, and we should remember the fact, which is easy to forget in these times, we are a we. It's a big we. We are a community of people who have political opinions that matter, and the more of us that meet together to do this, the more that matters.
And at the end of the day, our form of protest doesn't mean we have to put up a damn pole in the middle of the
Well, as I said it, I was like, yeah, this sounds insane.
I was like thinking it was going to be greased. And
No.
The
fact too is that I was like not asleep at 3 a.m, and I was like, Liberty poles, just like.
I'm quite intrigued by that. It was just a poll. Okay.
Yep.
All right. We got to get back to it. I wrote a whole thing about the fact that tomorrow's the anniversary of the 19th Amendment to the Constitution. And then of course, all the stuff dropped today, and I'm going to drop the letter and, as in get rid of it and write again. So I guess I'm going back to work at 7:30, which
there's something that not all of us saw, but that we need to see. And that is the thing you're going to be writing about.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's always lovely to chat. Good luck if I don't talk to you before you go back to school. Break a leg. Is that what you say to teachers? Break a leg?
I have no idea.
It's probably not a good thing to say to teachers because we do things like break legs.
It's true. I don't know what it is for teachers, but breaking a leg sounds not good.
I'm sure there is something. All right. Well, have a wonderful time. Good luck.
Well, thank you so much.
Go teach wonderful things.
I'm going to go teach wonderful things, and we will figure out another time when we can get together and do this.
Yeah. If you stay on afterward, we'll look at our calendars.
Sounds good. Okay.
All right, Joanne. Love you.
Love you too.
Talk to you later.